I haven't been heavily exposed to residential school when I was growing up. It wasn't until recently, during this project, that I discovered who in my family was affected by it. When I was approached about participating for this project, I had no idea what I was in for. Out of all honesty, I felt like I was biting off more than I could chew. Residential school is still a foreign concept to me, and it always will be. The only thing I could say is that I have some relatives and my two grandmothers had gone to residential school. I have also learned that my parents' grandparents went through residential schools too, so you can get the picture of how far back this continues. During this project and discovery, an overwhelming realization came over me. When I was listening to my parents tell me about my family history and how residential school affected certain members of my family, I had realized I had it good growing up. I'm damn lucky that I didn't have to go through residential school. I have no excuses not to try and work hard for myself and others. Looking back at my life, my parents brought me up in a good home and tried to teach me and my siblings good moral values. My relatives are also good to me. I like to point out that I understand very well that I was naturally assimilated into a culture of English-oriented education and Western idealism. But I still found it hard to place myself into the spectrum of intergeneration and how these effects are caused by residential school, because I am very proud of who I am and where I come from. I was never given painful, boiling hot baths when I was a boy. I was never beaten for speaking Cree or out of turn when a teacher asked what 3 times 25 was. I never had to eat raw onions every day or watch my family members drink themselves sick because of what happened to them at residential school. I was never separated from my siblings or my parents. The list, for all I know, can go on. I wouldn't know what else could have happened to me if I was in residential school. My father told me that his grandmother had to break a padlocked door down when she was 14 years of age because someone had started a fire from the outside of a bunkhouse that her and her peers stayed in during their time in residential school. You could imagine the shock and horror I felt. I could only imagine what was going through my great-grandmother's mind when she was able to set herself and her peers free. I literally cried at the thought of how messed up it was and how ridiculously hard it may have been for survivors, my grandmothers and my great-grandparents, to keep their chin-ups and to keep working hard for their kids and grandkids. Unfortunately, that's not the case for some of the folks that went through residential school and survived it. I can only emphasize and acknowledge how many survivors struggle to keep their heads above water. My generation and the next generation could only imagine what it would feel like to have your kids taken away, or to have siblings or family split up and sent to different residential schools. Or imagine the tragic amount of abuses and deaths that had taken place in the time of forced assimilation, colonialism, and false ties to God. It would be too easy for me to point fingers, accuse others, and force blame. Despite all the pain and suffering due to residential school, it doesn't change how we deal with the continuous problems in our culture and communities and way of life. If there is one thing I have learned about my family, this project, and residential school, that there is a resilience, courageousness, and a humble dignity that surrounds who we are and what we do as Aboriginal people. What I took from this experience now is that there is nothing stopping me from learning my language and teaching my future children about who they are, where they come from, and what it means to learn about their family history, teachings, traditions, and way of life.